Hello and welcome to episode 49 of the Refining Rhetoric podcast. We're doing a special series talking to dads, and we are talking to Noble Gibbens today. He is such a big character. You're going to have so much fun with us. He is a West Point graduate, a former Army Ranger in the 82nd Airborne Division, and today we're going to be talking about our emotions. Yes, he has a podcast called EQ Gangster where he talks about emotional intelligence. And we're going to go through that. And we will also practice the 15 tools of learning today and a little bit of crypto so that we can be a well-rounded, truth-seeking individual. So let's jump in.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today my guest is Noble Gibbens. Noble is a graduate from the United States Military Academy at West Point and a former Army Ranger in the 82nd Airborne Division. He's a homeschool dad, an entrepreneur. He is a emotional intelligence or EQ practitioner, teaching emotional intelligence to others on his 5-star rated podcast, EQ Gangster, and in his EQ Mafia membership. And he does corporate coaching and consulting. He worked here at Classical Conversations for a while. If you know Noble, you know he has a strong passion for people and helping them grow in their careers, personal lives, and relationships. He has a wonderful wife, Kathy, who homeschools their daughter with Classical Conversations. And they are just amazing human beings. Kathy has her own podcast as well, so you'll want to check that out. And just excited to be able to hang out with my friend here for a little while and talk to him and share his insights with you all. So, Noble, welcome to the show.
RB, it's good to see you, man. It's been too long, brother. Great to see you.
Yeah, way too long, man. Life catches up to us real quickly, but it's good to see you today, and I know it's going to be a lot of fun chatting with you and getting caught up on what you've been doing with your EQ Gangster podcast and how that can really help families with their children or with their careers. But Noble, something that we're doing new this year is asking people how do they define truth? You know, as Christians, I believe that finding truth is so important and that there isn't just your truth or our truth, but one truth. So how do you define truth?
I think it's all relative. I'm kidding. Robert's like, cut, end the interview. No, man.
Edit. I know that's not your right answer, but hey, that's the world's answer, isn't it, Noble?
Exactly. No, I'm totally joking. So, I mean, why can't I identify as a unicorn, Robert? I mean, come on, man. Or a taco, right?
Why not? Well, yeah. Why not?
That's right. No, for me, truth is defined as John 14:6, where Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. For me, my truth is God's word. Period.
Well, I'm 100% in agreement with you, so I love it. Now, I imagine that we can find truth in this world through Jesus, of course, but one of that is really knowing our emotions and helping us kind of control our bodies and our spirits. And, of course, you hear about, just depression, suicide, all of these things that are all-time highs. You might agree with me when I say it's probably because people don't know what the truth is anymore. But what is emotional intelligence, and what does an EQ consultant and coach do?
So, first question, what's emotional intelligence? I've got two answers. One, the way I define it is emotional intelligence is the ability to acknowledge, identify, process, and manage not just your own emotions, but also the emotions of others in order to make the best decision for all parties involved. That's how I define emotional intelligence, getting your emotions to work for you instead of against you. The original, one of the early models of emotional intelligence. Now, since then, there's truckloads of emotional intelligence models out there, but one of the early ones was Daniel Goleman, who wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence. I don't recommend starting with that book because it's very academic. There's other books I would recommend starting with, but he's one of the OGs of EQ. He talks about, in his early model, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social management. So kind of four main domains. Now, again, that's one of the early models. You've got some other questions that you, if you ask me, I'll break it down even further, but that's a good starting point. The ability to be aware, self-aware, and then not just the awareness, but you also have the ability to manage those emotions, but then also how good are you at identifying the emotions of your team for leaders, and then also being able to navigate and help others navigate their own emotions as well.
I know in an earlier episode, we have Ken Sandy on, and he talks about being self-aware, others aware, and then God aware, and talking about just being emotionally available and understanding what's going on around us and seeing what's around us. So what does an EQ consultant and coach do then for somebody?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I forgot about that one. So an EQ, so for me, my niche, if you will, is emotional intelligent leadership. So working with executives, I've got a handful of companies, big giant companies that bring me in to work with their leaders to develop their emotional intelligence as a leader. One of my favorite quotes that you share on my podcast a lot: emotionally healthy leaders create emotionally healthy cultures and organizations, which lead to optimized, maximized performance, engagements, and results.
Yeah, I mean, it's they say a fish rots from the head, right?
Love it.
If the lead isn't healthy, then it's going to be very difficult for the other parts of the organization to be healthy. And I can imagine that could be the same in a homeschool community or homeschool family as well.
Well, and Robert, let me throw this out real quick too, just based on that. Now, I know back when I was working with CC, however many years ago, I know we had this conversation, but that's an excellent point that you bring up. And I know you've got particular stats that you track from a C-level in terms of what determines a healthy community. Well, another thing is so in my world, right, how I view that is, well, what drives some of those are lagging indicators. Some of the leading indicators are what's the emotional health of the leader, how emotionally healthy is the leader, which affects. So how does that affect things? Well, that in terms of communities, what's the retention of a community? What's the attrition of a community? What's the longevity of a community? Does that community remain by itself, or does it lead to other communities? Right, a lot of different factors that are affected by, in my opinion, the emotional health of that leader who's running the show.
What are some ways that you've helped maybe a team or individuals see success in this? Like, do you have a couple of stories you could share, or something that maybe our listeners could relate to on maybe a struggle that they're having?
Yes. So I work with both entrepreneurs and leaders, and I'll tell you one example. So in one of the questions you asked me, the assessment that I use. I've got a couple different assessments that I use, but one of them is called the EQI 2.0 assessment, and it measures 15 different aspects of emotional intelligence. One of those aspects is empathy. This particular senior executive in this international multi-$100-million organization, his results came back, no empathy, like literally no empathy on his thing. And he said, Noble, shocking, I have no empathy. And then he said,
was he really shocked, or
no? He was being sarcastic.
You gotta recognize that himself.
He was being, but wait, there's more. So then he says, and he said, I don't care that I don't have empathy. And I said, right? So also shocking, right? The guy with no empathy doesn't care that he doesn't have empathy, right? And so And so he's like, look, Noble, I got to the top, right? Because he reports to the CEO. So he's like, dude, I am at the top of the food chain, minus one other level, and I got here with no empathy. Now, his particular organization is a sales organization. So he is a machine when it comes to sales. This was the first role.
Get your number or get out.
Right. That's right. Sign the deal or deuces, right? And so, but this new role that he had was he was leading salespeople now at this point. And so I said, the skills that it took for you to become an amazing sales leader or a salesman are different than leading salespeople. And so he said, oh, well, we'll see about that. So we start coaching with him and working with him. And I said, look, he's got 6 kids. I said, just start implementing some of the stuff. Just try it out at home and see what kind of impact it has. Try some of these tools. There's, these different tools that we came up with, action steps. Dude, after 6 months of working with him, he gets a letter, handwritten note from his 13-year-old daughter that said, Dad, thank you for being emotionally available for me when I've had troubles in high school and some of the challenges that I've had as a daughter, as a teenager. You've been there for me emotionally. He shared that with me, and he got emotional, shared that with me. He said, wow, Noble, now I see the benefit and value of applying empathy at home. There's got to be value at work also. He said, I never would have gotten this letter. Well, I never did receive this kind of letter prior to 6 months ago. So thank you. And that was, that was the best report card I could have ever gotten.
So it's not just, these aren't things you just do in the office, but they're things you can do at home. And what did he think? He was actually open to trying them. So he got to the top without empathy. Didn't feel like he needed to do it, but he was willing to try. So did you see something there in him?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I used, right? So that part of being for me, an effective coach, I feel, is speaking the language of the leader that I'm talking to. And for him, his language, because he's a hardcore type A achiever, reference to the book called StrengthsFinder 2.0, which is another great book and great resource. He is a hardcore driver. And what he values, the language that this dude speaks, is results. So anything that helps him get better results, he's like, I'm all ears. And at the time, he got results through his own efforts with no empathy. But again, when you're working with people, empathetic leadership is there's all kinds of Harvard Business Review articles, all kinds of books out there now on the importance of empathetic leadership, especially in today's crazy, tumultuous times. So he realized, and we made the connection for him and through his own application, first with his daughter, with his family, and then in the office, because I could share all kinds of stories. It has increased his territory sales. It has increased the closing rate of his salesmen, the retention of the folks the customers that he does have. It has played out in tremendously amazing ways, but he had to first apply it.
You talked about EQI 2.0 as assessment. Is that something like somebody can Google and take on their own, or is that something that is only done through like a consulting service?
Yeah, good question. So the particular assessment that I'm referring to here, the EQI 2.0 assessment, it has to be administered by somebody, by someone who's been trained, because the results, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2. This assessment has some nuance to it. And so part of my certification process and getting certified is anyone that receives the certification also has to have a 1-hour session with me so I can interpret and explain the results to them so that they can apply it in their own life.
And, what made you take EQI 2.0? Like, why did you select that assessment instead of maybe a different one that's out there?
Great question. So that was based on doing some research and stuff. It's a scientific psychometric assessment. So it's not something that Noble came up with in my basement, you know what I mean, through my all my mad skills and stuff. It was a group of scientists and researchers and psychologists and stuff that in fact, it was an Israeli psychologist who was embedded with the army, and his research project was what were the factors that affected a leader's decision-making process. And this assessment is the result of his 15 or 20 year research project. And so that was one thing. So I really liked the fact that it's a scientific psychometric. Now, since then, I've gotten certified on another assessment called DISC EQ, where it combines both personality and emotional intelligence, which is one way that I like to coach people anyway, because they're directly correlated. With someone with low EQ, their personality strengths will become weaknesses, and their personality weaknesses will be exacerbated. With someone with high EQ, their personality strengths can be optimized and maximized, while their personality weaknesses can be minimized or mitigated. So that's how EQ and personality go hand in hand. So that's why I like that the other assessment, the DISC EQ assessment plus, that has a huge platform that anyone who takes the assessment, say within a company, can get access to each other's profiles to a degree. So now if I'm in marketing, right, and I'm working for you at CC, and I've got a meeting with you, I can pull up your profile and it'll compare you and me together and say, okay, here's where you and Robert are alike, and here's where you and Robert are different. Here's how to get the most out of this meeting that you've got with Robert in 15 minutes or whatever. So it's a great resource as well.
That's great. Now, you're 82nd Airborne, military guy, all tatted up, and you're helping people get in touch with their emotions. So how did you get... So how did you really get involved with this? And I mean, your personality is perfect for this, obviously. But how did you decide to get in touch with your emotions and then help others do it as well?
Yeah, that is always the $1 million question. So I was born at an early age. There you go, Robert. I was waiting. I didn't know
if you were gonna continue that quote or not.
My mom's a 4'10" little Hispanic lady. My dad was a big giant white dude, ER doctor. He died about 13 years ago. But growing up, when I was a little kid, this is how we handled conflict. We would yell and scream at each other. Whoever yelled the loudest won. We would stomp off into our respective corners of the house, come back an hour later, and act like nothing happened. So what I learned about conflict resolution is stuffing and avoiding my emotions, and that was it. We didn't actually learn any conflict resolution skills in my house.
It doesn't work?
Right, that's right, exactly. And so what happened was that there's a lot of consequences. There's a lot of ripple effects when children do not get their feelings and emotions validated. Some of the consequences for me was I came out with a hardcore people-pleasing addiction, emotional neediness, emotional codependency, toxic positivity, along with a truckload of other stuff. Now, that led to, so then of course I go to West Point. We're not learning about feelings and emotions there. I go to, Ranger School and Airborne School, the infantry officer, not learning about feelings and emotions there. Then what's even better is I got into a business cult. And in that business cult, because of my emotional dysfunction, did very well in this business cult, to the tune of spoke all over the world to thousands of people. But again, all because of my emotional dysfunction. 20 years later, which is 4 or 5 years ago, I yelled at my wife 3 times in 3 weeks, and she said 3 things. Number 1, don't ever do that again. Number 2, you've never done that before, which means 3, you got more issues in Time magazine. I was like, snap, you're right. Went to counseling. The counselor was like, hey, McFly, let me introduce you to 2 revolutionary new concepts. And I'm like, hey, I'm ready, boss. What you got? He said, feelings and emotions. I was like, what on earth are those, man? I didn't get issued those at West Point. Like, I didn't need those at Ranger School. What are you smoking? And he said, dude, you like legit, you need help. And so I started this very intentional emotional fitness program. 2 years into my emotional growth journey, all these big areas of my life started to change and improve for the better. My faith, my marriage, my parenting, my finances, my fitness, my business, all these big rocks started to change and improve. And I'm like, man, babe, has this all been because I've been emotionally dysfunctional and now I'm finally taking ownership of my emotions and stuff? And I said, babe, I got to start a podcast sharing the junk in my trunk and my corresponding lessons learned. And that's how everything took off.
You never know what's going to come out of those low points in life. And it's just great to see how God redeems that. And appreciate you sharing that on our podcast. And I'm sure that if they want to learn more about it, they can go check out the EQ Gangster podcast. But, as long as I've known you, you've been outgoing and enthusiastic, and you just seem to really get excited about the life adventure you're on and those around you, finding out more about them. So what really gets you excited as you meet other people? Like, where does that enthusiasm come from?
So a couple things. One, double dose the Holy Ghost, right? It's for me, right? Because God loves people. That, like, he created us, he made us for a purpose, with a purpose, on purpose, and so I think that's one of the connections. I said the second thing is I just popped out of the womb. Like I've always loved people. But the third thing is my people pleasing addiction. And so I loved people, but in a very unhealthy way, because I would constantly seek out validation and approval and affirmation from everyone else around me. And it was exhausting. I had no idea how exhausting it was and how bad and how addicted I was, or that I was even addicted. I had no idea until, again, 4 years ago when I started my emotional growth journey. Now I can love people from an emotionally healthy place with boundaries. I didn't even know what boundaries were until 4 years ago either. So now I can love people. Yeah. That's right. That's right. So now I can love people, right, where I'm not emotionally needy. I can love Robert because I love Robert, not because I'm needy and I need to get validation and approval from Robert. You know what I mean?
And we loved you back then too. We love you now. So I was
Thanks,
just teasing
brother.
you. I was just teasing.
That was right. You're right, bro.
We talk a lot about, homeschooling and classical education, but this is also about business, and we have a lot of business owners that listen to the show. So what are some advice that you'd give to either a young entrepreneur wanting to start their own business, or an old dog who maybe is not as empathetic as they ought to be?
So yeah, great question, man. That's another passion of mine as entrepreneurs. So a couple things, a handful of things probably. One is start working on your emotional health. 99, I don't know what the percent, the majority of people have no idea how their emotions directly affect and impact their decision-making process. So I'll give you a quick example. So for me, literally until 5 some years ago when I started working on this stuff, I hated money. I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years, bro, and I've hated money. This is how bad I was. I would not pay the pizza guy. I would go in the bathroom, pretend like I was busy until Kathy came out and paid the pizza guy because I didn't want to deal with money. And finally, Kathy's like, dude, you got serious money issues. Like, what on earth is up? And I'm like, man, I have no idea. Let me pray about it, ask God. And what came up was when I was 6 years old, I heard yelling, screaming downstairs in the basement. And I come downstairs, I'm 6 years old. My mom is 4'10" mom, little Hispanic mom, is hiding behind the kitchen island, crying and screaming, while my King Kong, 6'4", 285-pound dad, gorilla, was standing in the middle. Now, he's normally a teddy bear, but this particular scenario, he was standing in the middle of the kitchen, literally throwing pots and pans, throwing chairs, breaking stuff, screaming, yelling. So of course I'm screaming, yelling. It was an incredibly emotionally traumatic experience for me. And once the dust settled, I realized the whole thing, this World War III in our house, was about this thing that I'd never heard of before called money. And in my little 6-year-old brain, I made a decision at 6 years old that if this thing called money can turn my saint, angel, teddy bear of a dad into Satan, I want nothing to do with money. I had no idea that I had made that vow until 5, 6, 7 years ago when I started working on this stuff. So that's just a little example of how So that's one thing. The other thing is, so check out, grow your emotions. The second thing is start, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's an old school book, but it teaches a lot about mindset. One of his other books that I love is called Why A Students Work for C Students and B Students Work for the Government. That's also by Robert Kiyosaki. It's an excellent book. Excellent book. The 4-Hour Work Week, The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster are all excellent books on entrepreneurship. The E-Myth Revisited. Study and learn from entrepreneurs. Homeschooling and entrepreneurship have so many things in common. And then also the other thing too, I was teaching some public school kid this last night, that you got to reframe failure. As an entrepreneur, failure is my professor. So for me, failure as an entrepreneur is not a bad thing. It's awesome. What can I learn from this? In jiu-jitsu, I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Every time I get tapped, what can I learn from it? I'm not my failure. I've failed and I will fail, but I'm not the failure. So a lot of times we attach our identity to failure when that's not the case. So that would be another thing I'd recommend to budding entrepreneurs or even old school entrepreneurs.
I know you obviously listen to the podcast, but are there 2 or 3 things that someone who says, okay, Noble, you got me, I want to learn about emotional intelligence. What is something someone can do today, maybe for 5 minutes, 10 minutes? What are two or 3 ideas for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. One is download an app called Mood Meter. It's not my app. I don't know whose it is. I don't make any money off it. It's 99 cents on the App Store. Mood Meter. And it starts working on growing your self-awareness and also your emotional vocabulary, which is a part of growing your emotional intelligence, and also even turns into a little bit of emotional management because it asks you why you're feeling that particular feeling, and it even defines different emotions in there as well. So Mood Meter app, it's simple. It takes 15 seconds to fill out. I recommend starting to fill that out maybe once a day, twice a day, 5 days a week. That's something that's really helpful. Another great tool is print off, go to Google, search emotion wheel, print out an emotion wheel. They've got stickers, they've got pillows, put it up in a refrigerator, in your office, that kind of thing, and start growing your emotional vocabulary. And then also, this is another fun exercise to do, sort of fun, is write down, I call it the origin stories around what your beliefs are about emotions. Because if you think emotions, like a lot of guys, specifically in the Western culture, have been trained, emotions are weak, emotions for women, emotions are worthless, you're not going to be super excited about doing anything with your emotions, let alone growing your emotional intelligence. So unpacking what those origin stories are surrounding your emotions is something that's really really helpful to do. And then also so emotional, and listen to podcasts, read books, start to grow your emotional vocabulary.
I did appreciate the tips because sometimes my wife says I could get in touch with my emotions better, but I do cry at weddings, especially that daddy-daughter dance. So I do have some emotions somewhere inside of me that are aching to get out.
That's a great, and one thing on that, Robert. The goal of emotional intelligence is not so we can all hold hands, skip around and bathe in essential oils and smell Skittle farts and rainbows and unicorns, right? That's not the purpose of emotions and emotional intelligence. God made us. God made emotions. Go through Proverbs and go through the Bible and circle every spot where there's an expression of an emotion. It will blow your mind. If God made emotions, why don't we spend time learning how to, again, acknowledge, identify, process, and manage these God-given things that impact la-di-da-di everybody? But we don't ever spend time doing that kind of thing, right? So which, in my opinion, makes us less effective leaders. So the goal of this is to make us better leaders, better husbands, better wives, better human beings, and use them as data, as information, as signs, and resources and tools, not these scary things that we just need to bury in the backyard. Why would we bury something and ignore something that God gave us?
Yeah, very true, and probably something that we don't consider often enough. And I'm glad that we're able to bring this light to our audience here today. As a homeschool dad, with a teenage daughter, which I'm sure is something that I'm looking forward to, and my daughter just turned 8, and I'm like, all right, and she's halfway to 16, and 10 more years she'll be out of the house. Not that we're necessarily forcing anyone to leave our house at 18, but that's just kind of the standards here in the United States. But what are some things that parents can do to help their kids with their emotional intelligence?
Dude, excellent question. So this is no joke. My kid, well, heck, and my wife would be in therapy right now if I had not been working on my EQ. Not even joking. I was so emotionally dysfunctional because by the time our daughter hit, teenage years, right, she's got the emotion cocktail going on, the hormone cocktail going on, all this stuff going on. And if I was not 4 years into my emotional growth journey by the time she became a teenager, bro, I'm telling you, it would be bad news bears. So this is probably a couple of the biggest things I would say. One is, and this is not even just a parent thing, this is a human being thing. If we could get more effective and more consistent and build a muscle memory to just validating and affirming each other's emotions, especially our kids, it would be life-changing. When is the last time you felt heard, seen, valued, and understood? I'm going to go out on a limb and say it probably doesn't happen very often. But when it does happen, it's incredibly powerful, and you probably remember it. Well, how often do we do that to other people, especially our children? Notice I didn't say agree with somebody's emotions. You don't have to. You can validate and affirm someone's emotions without agreeing with them, but at a minimum, validate and affirm where your child is at. Let them feel seen, heard, and understood. Again, you have to agree with them, but give them that validation of their of their feelings and emotions, because they're experiencing them whether or not you affirm them or not. But when we do that, now it helps them process, because that's the first thing. Validate and affirm. The second thing is help grow their own emotional vocabulary. So when they're feeling frustrated, tell them, hey, Susie, little Johnny, you're feeling frustrated right now. Give them a little CC action right here. Give them
grammar.
The grammar. Well, come on, CEO. That's right.
I know one thing. Hey, I'm one of those C students, because I'm a C student because I'm running the company and I'm not working for the government.
That's right. That's what, dude. I did cheetah flips when I got C's at West Point, bro. I was doing backflips, man. It was mostly fantastics and dynamics that I got most of the time, though.
The D's for diploma, but you had to pass your courses with C's.
That's right.
That.
So give them the grammar, right? Give them the grammar of emotions. And then also, the third thing I would say is be safe with their big, strong, unpleasant, uncomfortable emotions. Because this is what I did, because I had low EQ. When my daughter would freak out, guess what? I would immediately freak out. But now that I'm comfortable with my own big emotions and strong emotions and intense emotions, if she elevates or my wife elevates or anyone else elevates, I'm able to stay calm and stay present and stay available, and I don't get triggered with her. So that's something that's been a game changer as well.
Are there you mentioned some resources for entrepreneurs and learning about EQ. Is there anything specific for parents that you've run across that you would recommend?
So one book is called Changes That Heal by Dr. Henry Cloud. Another book is called Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. Another book is called Running on Empty by Janice Webb, Dr. Janice Webb, and Running on Empty No More, also by Dr. Janice Webb. Those would be a handful of books that I'd recommend for parents.
I've heard great things about Boundaries. I've not read it myself. Maybe I'll have to add that to my reading list. But I've heard, Henry Cloud's great, and those are some great resources, because a lot of times we're not sure where to start, and especially if we know that we need something. So it's great to have someone to guide us and who's been there and done that to point us in the right direction. Do you have an age where you start talking to kids about their emotions? As far as, I'm guessing it kind of staggers. For a little kid, you might just be like, you're angry or you're happy. How does that work?
Yeah, so foundations, right? Foundations age. So those elementary school ages. So 2, 3, 4 years old, you can start giving them the grammar of emotions. And as they grow and get older, then you transition from the grammar phase right into the dialectic of helping them understand kind of the connections between cause and effect. Okay, the reason you're feeling frustrated is because we were originally going to go play outside and play baseball, but it started raining, so you're feeling frustrated right now, right? Showing them, so it's kind of the grammar or the dialectic phase. But then the next phase is, and even you can start with it in the dialectic phase too, kind of the middle school years, is teaching them tools. So not just, so the first phase is the awareness, the grammar of the and the language, right, of emotions. But then the next phase is teaching them, again, the connections, cause and effect, but also some management tools so they can learn how to manage those emotions, and they're not scared of them. They become friends, because it's not like you're going to feel sadness only one time in your life. You're going to feel sadness throughout your entire life. So let's learn how to interact with sadness, not run from it or stuff it or avoid it, right? Or frustration or anger or joy or happiness or any of those emotions. We feel the menu, if we allow ourselves to, we're going to feel them throughout our entire life. So let's learn how to befriend them and be curious about them, not judge ourselves for feeling them or experiencing them.
Great. Some books to look up, some tips, some things we can do today. I think this episode has it all. So get you on your EQ journey. If that's a place that you want to improve upon, I think, it's probably a place all of us can improve. I know at Classical Conversations, we are always looking for ways to know the log in our own eye. Why do you talk about the speck in your friend's eye when you have this log in your own eye? And I think, some of these tools help us to recognize what logs we may have in our eyes that we didn't have insight into. And then how do we, take that log and maybe make it more of a splinter size in the future. So Noble, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you remind our listeners on where they can hear you, where they can connect with you, and how they can become an EQ gangster just like yourself?
Yeah. So EQgangster.com is the website. EQ Gangster is the podcast and also the YouTube channel. So, and then I'm also on all the social media spots as well, either my name or EQ Gangster as well.
Well, Noble, I know you impacted positively so many families when you were here at Classical Conversations, and you're continuing to do this through your ministry and your entrepreneurship, helping men and women and business leaders, get the most out of their people by understanding their emotions and being able to help others understand theirs to get the most out of a situation. So thank you so much for joining us today. Wow, that was a lot of fun talking to Noble. And another fun thing that's happening right now is Pride Month. It is June, and everyone is super excited about Pride. Of course, that's one of the 7 deadly sins. But you may have heard in the news, and Allie Beth talk about it, Target is selling product from Abernell's. I don't know, Abernell. It is a Satanist-inspired product designer, and Target partnered with them to design not Satanist clothing for them, but Pride-related clothing to sell in June. And according to the National Review, it said that Target sold 3 different items: a messenger bag saying "We belong everywhere" across the trans flag colors and planets, a tote bag with a message "Too queer for here" beneath a UFO, and a "Cure Transphobia, Not Trans People" sweatshirt. Apparently, only the sweatshirt remained on sale as of the publishing of this National Review article. Now, I don't necessarily want to talk about the specifics of Target and what's going on, but why is this all happening? Why is June? You see all these ads with homosexual couples and everything on your TV screen, on your Facebook feed, and all of these areas. And it's really driven by one group called the Humans' Right Campaign. And They did a great job naming, which is one of the 5 core habits of grammar, because who could be against human rights? But the Human Rights Campaign is not about human rights at all. It's about silencing Christians, and it's about driving a narrative inside of our culture. Now, interesting, you probably heard about the Bud Light controversy. So let's compare that, which is one of the 5 common topics of dialectic. So one of the reasons that Bud Light or Anheuser-Busch created a special can for this trans influencer, Dylan, who dresses like a little girl, is because they wanted to get a perfect score on the Human Rights Campaign's corporate index. But it kind of backfired on them because they got so much backlash. The Human Rights Campaign wrote Anheuser-Busch a letter saying, you need to respect your trans employees. You need to do this and that. And Bud Light was silent. So the Human Rights Campaign dropped Anheuser-Busch from their list of allies from 100% perfect score on their Human Rights Campaign corporate index in order to punish them for not going along with this trans idea. And so we want to, as Christians, as classicalists, really deliver a better idea to people. And it's that we love all of humanity. Jesus Christ died for our sins. That's every person's sins. And because sin sends you to hell, we need to give a better message that instead of saying that we love people who have mental issues, people who are going through gender dysphoria, we want them to get help. And true help is revealing Imago Dei in their life, that God did not make mistakes, that he has aligned their body to what he has desired from them. We do not mutilate other people if they have different things going on with them. And we shouldn't do that to trans people either. We should help them see that who they are in Christ. And that's true love, not going along with this insanity, which will lead to depression, suicide, and all sorts of other terrible outcomes. So be sure to go check out the Human Rights Campaign's corporate index. If you do business with any of these companies, I would suggest you write them a letter and encourage your friends to not use their products, and do whatever you can to push back, because they're coming after your kids and they're coming after our society, and they're doing it in a very intelligent way. And so we have to be smarter than they are. That's today's current event. Hey everyone, I want to interrupt this podcast to tell you a little bit about classical learning test. If you're tired of standardized tests that truly don't assess your child's knowledge and critical thinking skills, then look no further than the assessments offered by the Classical Learning Test, or CLT for short. Their exams are perfect for homeschoolers who are in the classical Christian methodology. Completing a CLT exam will encourage your child to apply the knowledge they have gained and to think critically, not to just fill in check boxes and receive a good grade. So if your family is looking for assessments designed specifically for seekers of truth, beauty, and goodness, the CLT is for you. Plus, if you're a member of Classical Conversations, you're in luck. You can get a 25% discount off the retail price of all CLT assessments. Just visit classicalconversations.com/CLT to receive your discount. That's classicalconversations.com/CLT. Now let's get back to the show. All right, let's jump into our classical crypto segment. Today we are looking at an article that was recently released in the UK, and the title of it is UK Parliament's Treasury Committee Calls for Crypto Regulations Citing Gambling-like Risks. And of course, we know that crypto is something that is a technology and is something that does have some value potential in the future. It's also something that has been used and abused in the past. So you always want to do your own research. But I wanted to pull out a couple quotes from this article. So in the 5 core habits of grammar, the tool of naming, a quote from there: regardless of the regulatory regime, their price volatility and absence of intrinsic value means that unbacked crypto assets will inevitably pose significant risks to consumers, members of the Treasury Committee said in a report published on May 17th. So they're trying to use the tool of naming by creating or using the tool of naming to create this idea of risk around crypto and really tie those two things together in order to give themselves probably more regulatory power over it. And they also have a quote in here. It says, the report from the Treasury Committee came after the British media outlet Sky News, ahead of the report's publishing, revealed that members of the committee had described crypto as having no intrinsic value and no useful purpose. So they're trying to compare crypto to other assets or other things in life that they believe have no intrinsic value and no useful social purpose, which is interesting on how they're trying to do that, especially when they said no intrinsic value, because if you go Google list of failed fiat currencies, you'll see a long list of government-backed dollars that have failed throughout the year. So do those have no intrinsic value other than perhaps the violence that backs them? Another interesting thing is I have a couple of rugby players staying with me right now. They are interning with us, and they're from Argentina. And the Argentina currency right now has a 97% inflation. And since they've come here for college, their Argentinian currency has been debased by, they said, 300%. So if crypto is risky, what about dollars that aren't backed by anything either? So yes, we always need to do our own research. And of course, there are scammers out there, but the crypto technology, triple-based accounting in itself is not risky. It actually reduces risk in ledger and being able to verify what happened. And so that's really the power of crypto. There are plenty of social purposes that it can be used for in the future, but the technology has to continue to be developed. So while I agree that there are risks to consumer, I disagree about no intrinsic value and no social purpose. So continue listening to Classical Crypto and all of our segments on Refining Rhetoric. If you know someone who needs emotional intelligence help, be sure to share this podcast with them, but don't tell them that's why you're doing it. Please make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.